Hi guys, my name is Jamie Gardner. I am the marketing coordinator here at Disability Rights Arkansas. I will be your host and moderator for today. Thank you for joining us for today's sessions, Voting with Confidence, Understanding Your Rights. And our speaker will talk to you more about your voting rights, understanding the voting process, polling place accessibility, and more. And now our speaker for today is Christian Adcock. Christian is the voting rights and public policy specialist here at DRA. He has worked here since 2013. He has conducted hundreds of access surveys at polling places around the state and has spoken on the issues related to voter access at conferences, voter education events, and in testimony before the Arkansas General Assembly. Christian holds a Juris Doctorate degree from the Euler William H. Bowen School of Law and a BA in History from the University of Central Arkansas. So this is a webinar. If you haven't already noticed, your video and audio are automatically turned off for the duration of this event. If you have any questions at all, please feel to drop them into the Q&A option below. There will be a time at the end of this session where we're going to go over all the questions and stuff that you guys have asked. We also ask that you help us keep this session accessible as possible by limiting irrelevant chat posts during the duration of this event. This will ensure that our attendees using screen readers can hear the speakers as everything posted in the chat is read aloud by screen reader devices. If you have any event-related issues, please message me directly. My screen name will be DRA Moderator or DRA Communications. And this session is recorded and will be available along with other resources in today's webinar shortly after this event is over. If you need closed captioning, there is a CC option below, and there is also a link in the chat for transcription. So now I'm going to turn it over to Christian today. Thank you for joining us. And let's go ahead.
Hey everybody, I can't actually see you, but it's good to see you here. Like Jamie said, my name's Christian Adcock. I do a lot of the voting work here at Disability Rights Arkansas. We'll be collecting your questions in chat, so please ask questions because the less talking I have to do, the better. I am kind of getting over being sick a little bit, so if you hear me sniffling or anything, that's what that's about. But let's go ahead and get started and talk about voting. So just to kind of get into it real quick, what are we doing here? I'm gonna talk about how do you register to vote, how to go to the polls and vote, the different where you can vote, not at the polls. I'll talk about absentee ballots. I'll talk about some of that stuff. There's a lot of things about voter registration that have been in the news lately as far as signatures and kind of the different methods to vote. I'm going to hope to kind of clear that up for you guys. And then we're going to talk about some sample, situations of things that might get in the way when you're trying to vote and try to give you some tools and strategies to help you deal with those if they come up, and hopefully they won't. Hopefully everything will go smoothly, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So to get started, I'm going to talk about who's eligible to vote to begin with, right? So you've got, in order to register, you have to be a citizen of the United States who's at least 18 years old on election day, which means, if you're 17 now, but your birthday is next month, which will be before election day, which is November 5th, you can go ahead and get registered now, and I highly recommend you do that. The sooner you get registered, the sooner you'll be able to deal with any issues that might arise when you try to get registered. If you have difficulty, hearing back from your county clerk, or you're not sure about your polling place, the sooner the better with all of this stuff. You have to be a resident of the state of Arkansas. You can't live somewhere else, which probably not going to be an issue for a lot of folks here. You can't be a convicted felon serving time or still parole. So there's a whole process for how to get your voting rights reinstated if you have been incarcerated. And that's something that we would love to give you information about. If that's an issue for you, you can feel free to contact us and I can point you in the right direction on that. But we're not going to dig too deep into that in this webinar. But like I said, if that's something that is going to affect you, go ahead and give us a call and we can walk you through the steps to get those voting rights reinstated. And you can't have been adjudicated mentally incompetent after October 1st, 2001. The reason for that date is because that's when it was put in place by the legislature. Adjudicated mentally incompetent basically means, do you have a guardian? If you have a guardian, unfortunately, you won't be able to register and vote. So there's ways to go back to court and get that right restored. And that's another thing where it's a fairly involved process. So I'm not going to go into it too deeply here. But if that's something you have questions about, if you are under a guardianship or you have a ward that wants to vote, please contact us and we can help you out with that and try to get that set up. So I've mentioned registration a few times. Where do you go to get registration forms? You can go to the state revenue offices, public libraries, Department of Human Services offices, disability agencies like us. And if you contact us, we will send you a registration form. National Guard offices or online. Now, but it says online, but the important thing to remember is that under the law, there is no online voter registration in Arkansas. So you can go online and you can get the form, but you're still going to have to print it out, fill it out, sign it with what they call a wet signature, which is just pen and paper, and then either mail it in or hand deliver it to your county clerk's office. Do not think that you can register online. This is important because if you go somewhere and you think you've registered online, you haven't, you're not registered to vote. So it's very important if you want to make sure that you're registered that you do it this way. It's not the most modern system, but it's the system we have. So that's kind of, how that works. You have to have the paper form. And like I said, there's plenty of places you can get them. If you can't get them, we'll mail one to you. But you're going to need to fill it out. You're going to need to sign it, you sign or make your mark, and then you're going to need to bring it in or mail it in. So, and it does need a stamp for the mailing too. So that's kind of the other issue with it. But that's where you get your registration forms. And let's move on. We have a photo ID requirement here in Arkansas. So you're going to need to show a photo ID to vote. It's got to have your picture and your name. It's got to be issued by the state, the federal government, or an accredited college if you have a school ID. You can use an expired ID, but it can't have been expired for more than 4 years. So it is okay if you have an ID that's expired. There's different types of IDs that are acceptable. These are a bunch of them right here: driver's license, photo ID card, concealed carry permit for a firearm. This next one is the important one that I wanted to talk about the most. It's a voter verification card, and it's something that you can get free of charge. And it's an ID, it's your picture, your name, and it's solely for the purpose of voting. So if you don't have any of this other stuff and you just need a photo ID, you can always go and get one of these free of charge from your local DF&A office, Department of Finance and Administration, the same place you go to get a driver's license or a regular photo ID, a state ID. And then, military ID, public assistance ID card, if you have one of those, and a college ID, like we mentioned before. Now, there is an exception to the ID requirement. If you live in a long-term residential care facility, something like that, and you don't have any kind of ID, there is a form, and there's a link to it here, and I don't know if you can click on that or not, but because I don't know how Zoom works. But it's something where if you need to print that form out, you can have the administrator at the facility where you live sign off on it, and it's an affidavit, which is basically a fancy term that says, the person signing it swears that, you live at their facility and you're a resident of Arkansas. And you can do that if you don't have any other kind of ID and you live in one of these facilities. So when you go to vote, you can take people with you. You can bring a person of your choosing to the polling site. It can be anybody you want, almost. Mom, dad, brother, sister, friend, random person you met in the street earlier. Doesn't matter. You can bring whoever you want, unless they're your boss, a union officer from a labor union that you belong to, or a candidate that's actually on the ballot. Those are the 3 people that aren't allowed to assist you. Anybody else is fair game. So if you're worried about the voting experience itself, maybe it's your first time, maybe you just kind of want somebody there to help you out, with navigating the process, you can absolutely bring somebody with you, and it's not something that you have to worry about. Excuse me. you can just bring anybody in to help you out with voting. I don't recommend actually bringing in somebody from off the street, but whatever works. Um, when you get to vote, you're going to get in line. And if you are in line and you're waiting in line and you have a disability that kind of makes that harder for you, you can ask to be moved to the front of the line or to have a chair to sit in if standing for long periods of time isn't something that you're good with. Um, but when you're in line, you'll get eventually up to the front and there will be a table and there will be poll workers there who will have a list of all the registered voters for that polling place. And they're going to check your name and ID against that list. Now, if there's a mistake and your name isn't on the list for whatever reason, you're going to have to vote something that's called excuse me, a provisional ballot. Provisional ballot's a separate ballot that you fill out and it's set aside by poll workers so it can be counted later once they determine, you are who you say you are. So the important thing for you to remember in this situation is if they say, oh, we're not seeing your name on the list, don't leave without voting. Ask for that provisional ballot. It's important because if you just leave, your vote's not going to get counted. So you've got to ask for that ballot and make sure that things get counted. And don't worry about it. It's not, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong and it doesn't mean they did anything wrong. I mean, this kind of stuff happens. It's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of names. Elections are big endeavors, so don't worry about it. Don't get mad about it. Don't, nobody's odds are nobody's trying to prevent you from voting. It's just a paperwork mistake. So just ask for that provisional ballot, make sure it gets filled out and set aside. And when you do fill it out, you should get instructions for how to check with your county clerk later to see whether or not it was counted. So next, you can ask poll workers for help. If you don't have anybody, if you don't bring anybody with you and you get there and you're feeling kind of overwhelmed or you don't know how the machine works, or again, first time voting, you just got the jitters, you can ask a poll worker to help, and poll workers can help you vote. They can't tell you who to vote for. They can't explain ballot issues for you, and we'll get into ballot issues a little bit more later. But you can ask them for help, and the way that works is two of them will help you. There'll be one person there to actually help you, and then another person who's there to make sure they're not telling you who to vote for or explaining things to you in a way that's wrong. So that's how that works. Um, if you feel like you've made a mistake filling out your ballot, if you're doing a paper ballot, you can ask for a new ballot. You can, that's your right. And they will give you up to 2 replacement ballots. So, if you, and this is more likely with a paper ballot than a touchscreen ballot. Touchscreen ballots will let you review at the end and change if you've made any mistakes. It's easier to go back and make changes on a touchscreen ballot because it's all on a screen. But if you're filling out a paper ballot and you feel like you've made a mistake, don't hesitate. Don't feel bad or like you're doing something wrong. Just ask for a new ballot. Say you messed up. Everybody messes up. And then you should be able excuse me, to get a replacement ballot. And you can do that twice. So don't stress about it. When you vote, talked about this a little bit just now. There's a couple different ways to vote. You can use a touchscreen machine if they have it set up, if you need that. And that should also include if you're blind or you have vision issues, the touchscreen should come with a headset that they can set up and use to sort of read the ballot to you like a screen reader. So, that's the touch screen voting in general is where a lot of your accommodations are going to come from. If that's something you need, you can magnify the ballot on screen, all that stuff. You can vote with a paper ballot, which is just fine. People have been doing it forever. It'll be either a paper ballot with you fill in the bubbles and then put it in the scanner at the end, or it'll just be a regular paper ballot, you fill it out. And then you can vote absentee, which is a whole separate process. An absentee ballot is basically a ballot that gets sent to you in the mail, and then you fill that out and mail it back in. And we'll talk about that later. Now, when can you vote? Early voting is what I recommend generally if you're going to vote in person. The election day this year is November 5th. Early voting is going to start 7 to 15 days before the election. It depends on your county. Usually it's a good 2 weeks before the election. With early voting, the locations and times are going to be different than on election day. So on election day, you have all of the polling places or all of the vote centers are going to be open. And a vote center, really quickly, the difference between a polling place and a vote center. A polling place is assigned to certain people in an area. So if it's your neighborhood library, that's where everybody in your neighborhood goes to vote, and people who aren't from your neighborhood or precinct is what they call it. Can't vote there. They have to go to their own separate polling place. A lot of counties have moved to using vote centers now. And the way a vote center works is that you'll just have 15 vote centers in your county, and you can go to any one of the vote centers in your county to vote, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the one in your neighborhood. So if it's more convenient for you to stop there after work or on your way back from running some errands, you can do that, and it's not going to matter. So find out if you have polling places or vote centers in your county. That's something you can call. Excuse me. You can call and ask your county clerk if that's something you're not sure about. But anyway, that on election day, all of those are going to be open. For early voting, usually there will only be 2 or 3 locations where you can go vote for early voting. So to figure out where, and that's going to be different in some counties, it'll be that library. In other counties, it'll be the county clerk's office itself. So you're going to want to either call in advance, or a lot of the time that stuff will be in your local news, whether it's online or in the paper. You can find it that way. The easiest way to do it and the best way to be sure is just call your county clerk and ask about, hours and location. But I recommend early voting because you don't have to deal with, it's not quite as chaotic as election day. It won't be as crowded. You can go, so it's a 2 week window. You can go when it's going to be most convenient for you. And it's just generally, if there is an issue, let's say you have to vote a provisional ballot or there's another issue at the polling place as far like access issue, you're not able to get in because of physical barriers, that kind of thing. If you go and try to do early voting first and something like that comes up, then you still have that extra time to fix it and still be able to vote before election day. So that's why I recommend early voting the most. And it's more convenient. It's less crowded. If you don't want to be surrounded by people, highly recommend. But look into early voting, find out where that is. Like I said, call your county clerk. Don't be scared. Don't be nervous. Just give them a call. This is what they're there for, is to answer these kinds of questions and tell you and administer elections. So they're not going to be mad. Nobody's going to be mad if you call them and ask them where you're going to go vote. So what to do if your polling place isn't accessible. Now, this is something that we see a little bit. We go throughout the state. Disability Rights Arkansas goes around the state, and we look at different polling places to see what kind of barriers there are. And a lot of them will have some issues because when county officials are selecting polling places, they're looking at, where's the nearest public building that's going to be available that's going to let us run an election. So sometimes it's honestly it's not optimal. You'll have churches kind of in the middle of nowhere in more rural areas, things like that, and they don't always have all of the kind of ramps and doorknobs and things like that that they need. So this can come up. This can be an issue. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Help America Vote Act, all these polling places are supposed to be accessible. So if somewhere is selected to be a polling place, it has to be accessible under the law. They should have things like designated parking, paved walkways, paved parking lots. There should be a clear path from your car into where you vote, and the area where you're voting should also be clear. So these are the kind of things you need to look for. If your polling location isn't accessible, I would say make a few calls. The most important thing, and I would say keep this number with you when you go to vote, your local county clerk's office. They're going to be the ones on the ground who are going to be able to fix problems as they come up on the spot. You're going to have a much easier time getting them to do something right away than you will if you call, say, some of the other numbers on here, like the Secretary of State or the State Board of Election Commissioners, or even Disability Rights Arkansas, because there's only so many of us. We can only be in so many places at once. And generally, I would say, in my experience with this kind of thing, calling your county clerk's office first is a good idea, not just because they can do it quicker, but because a lot of the times, if there is a problem, it's not something that they're doing out of malice. They're not out to get anybody. A lot of the time, they just honestly don't know any better. And if you call them and explain the problem, they will want to fix it because they want people to. That's the thing to remember when I talk about county officials or poll workers, things like that. Poll workers are volunteers. They're there on their own time trying to help out because they think it's a good thing to do. So don't assume that if there's a problem, it's because the poll worker is being, mean or nasty or doesn't want you to vote or anything like that. Not saying that that can't happen, but that's probably not what's happening. So, give everybody a little bit of slack. Always be nice when you're talking about this stuff. If you have a complaint, that's what I tell people. You guys always be nice. If there's a real problem and they can't get it fixed, then, call Disability Rights Arkansas, call the Secretary of State, call one of these other numbers, and I won't be nice. But you just go ahead and be nice, try to get things done, because like I said, if there's a problem, it's mostly just because they don't know any better and they want to fix it. So just keep that in mind. And also, as a side note, if you can, consider volunteering to be a poll worker because everybody needs poll workers nowadays. Especially if you have the time, if you can get off work and it's something you're interested in, if you're interested in any of this stuff, contact your county clerk. And it's definitely too late this election cycle, but contact your county clerk and ask about the steps to volunteer to be a poll worker if that's something you're interested in doing. Now, voting absentee, we talked about this before. This is the mail option, and it's kind of the only mail option we have. We don't have universal vote by mail here in Arkansas. So if you want to vote absentee, request an absentee ballot, and then they mail it to you, you mail it back in. Only certain groups of people can vote absentee. If you're going to be it's pretty broad, but if you're going to be unavoidably absent from your polling site on election day, so you've got a vacation planned, you're not going to be available. You can do it then. You won't be able to attend due to illness or disability. There was a lot of this during COVID, during the 2020 election. A lot of folks voted absentee, and they actually made it during COVID. They changed the rules so that you didn't have to even explain. You could call in and say, "I want an absentee ballot." Um, if you or a family member are going to be in the military and you're going to be away due to active duty status, you can get an absentee ballot. And if you're a citizen who lives in Arkansas, but you're living out of the country currently for work or something like that, you know, you can get an absentee ballot that way. Most folks, it's going to be the first or second thing that's going to be the reason why they need an absentee ballot. But if you want to apply for an absentee ballot, you contact the county clerk's office in the county where you're registered, and they'll send you an application. You can also get that application from the Secretary of State's website, and I've got that link here. Excuse me just a second. But those are the two ways to get an absentee ballot. County clerks, again, going to be easiest. They're only looking at the one county. It's pretty easy. Downloading it can be easy. It depends on whether you've got a printer, other stuff like that. But just the simplest way to do it is going to be just have them mail you one. The absentee ballot, you're going to want to get that. And the absentee ballot, when you receive it, it's going to have instructions for how to fill it out, how to send it back, the deadlines for sending it back, which can be kind of complicated depending on whether you mail it or you want to hand deliver it. And that's something that I'm going to go ahead and say, just go ahead and read those instructions. If you're having issues with them, call us. If you need some help, we can happily, but I don't want to go too deep into it because it's, like I said, it gets a little bit weird and complicated. But if that's something that you're looking at doing and you're having trouble, go ahead and call us or ask your friends, ask your family. The good thing about an absentee ballot is you can kind of sit with it for a while. There's no time pressure. You can sit at your kitchen table and fill it out. You can have whoever you want help you fill it out if that's something you feel like you need. And it's in a lot of ways, it's more convenient. And the best way to do it, I would say, is hand deliver it. You can mail it in, but if you want to be sure it got there, then either you or somebody can bring it in and just return it to the county clerk's office by hand. And then that way, it got there. You don't have to stress about it. You don't have to worry. So, um, we've got some poll questions that are up, and I was told to give it about 30 seconds and let everybody fill it out. So here you go. Um, just some questions so we can kind of get an idea of, are you registered to vote? Is this going to be your first time voting? Have you ever had an accessibility issue at a polling site? These kinds of things. And it'll give us an idea of sort of who signed up for the webinar. It helps us out if you answer these poll questions. And yeah, so go ahead and says host and panelists can't vote, but I am registered to vote. This won't be my first time voting, and I've never had an accessibility issue, but Lord knows I've seen quite a few. So go ahead and get that filled out. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is just kind of doing your homework on the issues. If you're going to vote, you want to know what you're voting for. You don't want to just let somebody kind of tell you what's going on. It's your vote, it's your decision. You get to choose what if you're going to do it, you should be voting what you want. That's the whole point. So, you can go to state election official sites. You can get a sample ballot for your area, which is important. If you're worried about getting confused when you go in to vote, getting a sample ballot on the internet is very good to have, because it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a sample ballot that has all the races and all the ballot issues that are going to be on your individual ballot, because different people in different places are going to be voting for different things. You're going to be voting for the sheriff of your county, not the sheriff of another county. I don't know where you live, but it's going to be a good tool. You can print it out, you can fill it out, you can bring it with you. You're allowed to bring a cheat sheet. No, it's not a pop quiz. If you want to go in and vote, you can bring a piece of paper that will tell you, what choices you were looking to make, what you want to do. So if you're worried you're going to forget or get confused, or, especially with ballot issues they tend to be very long. It's things like, in the last election, I believe there was one about casinos, there was one about medicinal marijuana, things like that, that they tend to be issues or changes to the law or changes to the Constitution, and they're not easy. They're complicated. They're long. There's a lot of text. It's a lot of things to read. And if it's something that I have a law degree, and sometimes I think they're written in a way that's too confusing. So there is no shame whatsoever in taking some extra time with those, going over them, making sure you're voting for what you actually want, because they can be worded confusingly. But that's definitely something to give a little bit of extra time, and that's what a sample ballot can really help with, is having that there in front of you. Read as much information as you can on candidates and issues, with one caveat: read actual news sources, read candidate websites, read issue websites. Do not trust social media. Do not read something from freedomeagle.com on Facebook and assume that it's true. Do real research, try to dig a little bit deeper, because a lot of the things that you're going to read on Facebook or Twitter or wherever might not necessarily be true. Now, a lot of things you read on other websites might not be true either, but my general rule of thumb, because without getting too deep into it, is just social media is not a source. It's just somebody's opinion. So try to find real news sources, and educate yourself on these issues, because this stuff is important. It's going to affect elections, affect a lot of things. um, they affect where funding goes, they affect what programs get started, they affect all kinds of stuff that will have an effect on your daily life. So it's real important that you don't just go in and vote based on vibes, like, oh, that guy, I like their haircut. Like, you want to know what you're voting for. And that's kind of to get real preachy, that's sort of your responsibility as a citizen. That's the part of voting that you bring to the table, is you need to be an informed voter. And there's all kinds of information out there. There's accessible information from the League of Women Voters, other nonpartisan groups. Nonpartisan means they don't lean Republican or Democrat, if you don't know. They just sort of they present the information in as non-biased a fashion as possible. And I really, that's what you want to look for, so you can make up your own mind without anybody else telling you how to vote. Why is this not a good? There we go. Like I was just said, some responsibilities on your end. Make sure you're registered to vote. When you send in your registration form, most of the time they will send you a card. It's a voter registration card. It's going to have your name, your address, your assigned polling place, if that's something that your county does. If they have vote centers like we talked about before, they won't assign you a polling place, but you got to make sure you're registered. If you don't receive that card after a week or two, you can either call your county clerk's office and ask them, hey, am I registered? Or you can go on VoterView, and that link's coming up in a couple slides. But VoterView is a website run by the Secretary of State that has a lot of helpful voting information, but it will tell you if you're registered or not. And you definitely want to double check that registration. I always do, possibly because I'm a little bit paranoid, but it's definitely worth doing just for your own peace of mind. Know the issues in the candidate. We already talked about this a lot, but just to reiterate, Facebook is not a news source. So moving on. Ask questions if you need help. If you need help with anything, if you have process questions, ask your friends, ask your family, ask people you trust. If you don't have anybody to ask, call us. I'll get back to you. If you call Disability Rights Arkansas with a voting question and you need some help before the election, I'll call you back or I'll email you or whatever. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This stuff can get kind of complicated. Voting itself probably is a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, if I'm being honest. So, if you have questions, don't worry, you're not alone. We have a lot of materials on our website as well. We've tried to put together a frequently asked questions booklet. And if Jamie can throw the link to that in the chat, that would be great. I didn't tell her I was going to do that, so hopefully hopefully that's something we can do. But it's on our website. You can go look at that, and that should help you with any basic questions. But if you read through that and you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you out. Here's some voter resources like I was talking about. Vote 411, the Secretary of State, that VoterView website I was talking about. Rock the Vote is another good source of nonpartisan voter information. And then the Voter Issues Project is another good one as well. So these are all places you can go, just a few to kind of get you started. There's more, but I didn't want to, a PowerPoint slide with 30 website addresses is probably not entertaining for anybody, but this is a good place to start and you can do that. And like I said, if always feel free to ask questions. So how do you get prepared for election day? There's a few things you can do ahead of time. You can find the location of your polling place. If you do have an assigned polling place, or if there's a specific vote center that you're going to want to go to, find the location. If you need to, go there a few days beforehand, check it out. Just make sure you know how to get there. If you need to figure out a transportation plan, if that's an issue for you, if you're using public transit or you got to get a ride, work on that ahead of time. Don't wait until the day of to figure out how you're going to get to the polling place, is basically what I'm saying. You can do a lot of places if you're somebody that takes the bus. A lot of places will run free buses on election days. That's going to vary from county to county, so I can't say for sure, but it's something that's worth looking into if you use the bus. Make a list of the candidates and the issues you want to cast your votes for. And this, like I was talking about earlier, this is what a sample ballot is really good for, is because it's going to look just like the ballot. So you can go through and check it off and have it with you. But if you don't have a sample ballot, let's say you're like me and you don't have a printer in your house because, why would you? Then you can just write down handwritten notes. You can put it on paper. It's going to be okay. Nobody's going to, you're allowed to bring whatever you want into the polling place with you as far as notes on paper. So don't worry about it. I recommend doing it if it's something, especially if you're a first time voter or if you're having trouble kind of keeping everything straight, because a lot of, like I said before, there's a lot of things to keep track of on a ballot, especially if it's your first time. So I would also recommend keeping the contact info for your county clerk, for Disability Rights Arkansas, and for anybody else that you think you might need to contact. I If you can only bring one, I would love to say Disability Rights Arkansas, but it's not. Like I said earlier, if you can only bring one number with you as sort of, call this person in case of emergency, have it be your county clerk. Because like I said, they're going to be able to respond the quickest and hopefully deal with any issues on the ground fast. And then that way you can go ahead and get voted and get out of there and get your sticker. So that's what I would recommend bringing with you on election day. So we're going to go through a couple just possible issues that might come up while you're trying to vote. We actually talked about this one earlier. If you're having difficulty physically standing in line to vote, let's say you go on election day, there's a long line out the door. It happens sometimes. You can ask a poll worker to move you to the front. You can ask them to provide you with a chair. You can ask them to let you inside if it's hot outside and you're standing out in the sun, if that's going to be a problem for you. These are all things you can do. If you're in the voting booth and you don't know how to operate the machine, if you get in there and you're just lost, they sit you down and you don't know what to do, ask for help from a poll worker. Like I said before, that's what they're there for. Poll workers are volunteering their time to help people vote. They want to help you. And in this situation, like I said before, there's probably going to be two of them. It'll be one to help you vote and then another one to make sure they're doing it the right way. But ask. Do not be afraid to ask. Don't be ashamed to ask. It's what they're there for. It's their job. If a poll worker is being negative or making you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, ask for another poll worker to help you. That's something you can do. You can ask to speak to the precinct captain if there's a real problem. They're kind of the people who oversee the polling place on election day. And if it's really bad, and if nobody at the polling place wants to help you, this is why you have your county clerk's number. You can call them and say and explain the situation and hopefully get things worked out. Poll worker says you can't vote. This is the thing we talked about earlier. Ask for a provisional ballot. Find out why they're telling you you can't vote, whether it's an ID issue or a voter rolls issue. The voter rolls are those lists of registered voters that they have at every polling place. But yeah, ask for a provisional ballot. Make sure you vote a provisional ballot. Do not leave without voting. Especially if it's on election day, this is the other reason I recommend early voting. It gives you extra time to sort this kind of thing out. But if it's on election day, make sure you get that provisional ballot, because if you just leave, that's it. There's no voting after election day. So you've got to get something on paper if you want your vote to count. So why should you vote? It's right, it's your right as a citizen. It's the best way to make change in your community. It's your direct voice as far as what programs get put in place, what money gets spent, what ideals elected officials are representing. These are all important things, and this is how you affect that in a tangible way. It's your way of making sure that the issues that are important to you are important to the people in government. And I would say that doesn't stop with voting either. What you're going to want to do is, know who your elected officials are so that once they are voted in, you can call their office, that kind of thing they work for you and you need to let your opinion be known. But kind of step one of that is to go and vote. People with disabilities for years and years were disenfranchised. Accessibility issues, disrespect from poll workers, that kind of thing. And so you should also vote because of that, because a lot of people fought real hard for people with disabilities to have equal access to the vote. And so, not to get preachy again, but you kind of owe it to them. If it's something you can do and if it's something you want to do, then you absolutely should. And this is the disability rights contact information. Get all this stuff down. That number on election day, if you call, that's what you're going to call if you need help when you go to vote. And yeah, you can also reach us, our Facebook, our Twitter, if you send DMs that way. That'll get to me as well if you have questions. That might be easier. I don't know, whatever works for you. But like I said, if you have questions, reach out and I will get you an answer to your question if I can. If it has an answer, I will get you an answer to the question. If it's something weird or not voting related, like don't ask me not voting related questions. I don't know a lot about math, but voting, I'm good. Anyway, this is our contact information. And so that's kind of it for the presentation. Get your questions in and we can go from there.
All right, so it does look like we do actually have a couple of questions. So the
Okay.
first one is from Shannon. Shannon asks, suppose if someone has recently moved to Arkansas, they would have to apply for a photo ID and voter registration form before that deadline. Would that be correct for new residents?
Yes. And luckily, because of a law that was passed back in the 90s called, it's got a longer name than this, but nickname is motor voter. You can do that all at the same time. If you go to the DMV, DFNA, whatever, to get your ID and get your driver's license at the same time, they should ask you if you want to register to vote, and you can do that all at the same time. So that's one way to do that. Now, I don't think I mentioned it actually. So just to be clear, you have to be registered to vote 30 days before the date of an election if you want to vote in that election. So I would say that's going to be around October 5th, I believe, is going to be the deadline to register. Register before then. Register by like mid-September. If you're on here right now, you're not registered and you're going to be registered by halfway through September, because that way, like I was talking about earlier, if there's an issue with the registration, that gives you time to clear it up. I don't think I had the thing about the deadline in there, so I wanted to throw. If you're a new resident to Arkansas, you're going to need to register. And if you're not a new resident to Arkansas, but if you've moved within Arkansas, like let's say you moved from Little Rock to Benton, you're going to need to change your address with your voter registration. And you do that, it's the same form you use to register to vote in the first place. There's a separate section for address change, and you just fill out your new address and send it in like you would the old form.
Okay, we have a question from Linda. Linda says this will be their first election with severe hearing loss. I wear hearing aids, but I still have problems understanding what's being said to me. I do not have ASL skills. What accommodations are there to the hard of hearing?
You can, if you make it clear that you're having problems understanding folks, you can ask for them to, write stuff down if that's something that you're comfortable with. There's also, with the actual voting itself, that shouldn't be much of an issue. But as far as dealing with the poll workers, if you're having issues understanding them, you can have them write stuff down. That shouldn't be a problem. I'm not sure what else, honestly, but if you can get us your contact info, I can get you some more information about available accommodations on that, because I don't know. I don't have an answer for what county is going to have what, because there's just too many counties, but I can try to help you out and figure that out for you if you like.
Okay, and then we have a question asking, can you please talk more about the free ID options?
Yes, there is, like I said, it's that special specific voter ID, and you can just go in to, DFNA, wherever your county office is for that, and ask for the free voter ID, and they should just give it to you. It's pretty simple from what I've been told. I haven't heard of anybody having any issues getting them. Again, it's something you're going to want to do sooner rather than later in case there are issues, but it should just be as simple as going down to the DMV and getting that free ID. And it's only valid for voting. So it's not, don't get it and think you've got a state ID, but it'll do the trick, and it should be pretty easy to get. Just go to your local county DMV office.
Can you volunteer at your polling place, or is that a conflict of interest?
Can I?
Or
Uh,
like you as a like it's like can a person volunteer at their own polling?
Anybody can volunteer. Well, unless you're a candidate, I think that might be a problem. But otherwise, if you're just a voter, anybody can volunteer at their polling place, and that's fine. There's rules for that. There's trainings you have to do. I've helped some counties with their trainings when it comes to the disability aspect. But no, if you contact your county clerk and ask to volunteer, I'm sure they would love to have you. A lot of places have trouble getting enough volunteers. It might, like I said, be too late this election cycle because they might have already done all the trainings and everything. Excuse me. But yeah, no, I know for a fact that county clerks, the more volunteers they can get, the better, because they have been having trouble getting enough volunteers the last few election cycles. So I can't think of a reason why there would be a conflict. Like I said, unless you're a candidate yourself, I don't think there's an issue there. Maybe if you're a family member of a candidate, I honestly don't know. I'd be interested to know that one. But yeah,
Where can you find out where candidates stand on disability issues specifically?
specifically, that's tough. You can go on their website and see what they have on there. You can, try to contact them if you're at a campaign event. Disability Rights Arkansas are looking at doing some candidate forums in a few months where we ask candidates about disability issues. Now, whether or not that's going to be, your candidate, I don't know. But look for candidate forums, look for interviews, things like that. Again, this is one of those things where you kind of got to do a little bit of research. I would recommend, if it's an option for you, go to a campaign event and ask them. Go to a candidate forum, like one of the ones we're looking to put on, and ask them. But like I said, if you want to know, we're probably not going to have your school board candidate at our candidate forum, so it's just kind of things like that. If you're looking for a specific candidate, the best thing you can do is just reach out to them and ask. Again, they're campaigning for your vote to work for you. So, don't feel like you can't ask them questions. I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get an answer, but you can ask people these questions if they're trying to get your vote, because that's how they get your vote. So I don't know if that was helpful at all, but look for more information on our candidate forums coming up, by the way.
Okay, well, that looks like the last one. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in there. And if not, please be on the lookout. I will be posting and sending out an email and on all of our socials with resources for this webinar, and a recording of this will be available in the next 2 weeks. I wanted to say thank you, Christian, for speaking today about voting rights, and hopefully by November, you guys can vote with confidence based on the information that you've learned here today. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us at toll free at 800-482-1174, or find us on our website. Okay. And that is all for today. Thank you guys very much. And thank you all for everybody for tuning in today.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, y'all have a great day. Thank you.